There were moments at the counter that taught you things no one ever said out loud. You stood there with cash already in your hand, folded once, thumb pressing it flat against your palm. The bills were warm, slightly damp. You'd counted them twice in the car, once more in the aisle, and now you were counting again without moving your fingers, just feeling the edges, making sure the number was still the same. The fluorescent lights hummed above you. Your shoulders were tight. You could feel the texture of the paper changing from your sweat, softening at the crease. You watched someone ahead of you pay without hesitation. They pulled out a card, swiped it, didn't look at the screen, signed without reading, took their bags and left. The whole thing took seconds. You noticed how their face didn't change, how they didn't pause, how the transaction was just a motion, not a decision. They didn't check their phone first, didn't calculate, didn't stand there doing math. They just paid and walked away like it meant nothing. The cashier said the total, and there was a specific kind of silence that followed. Not long, just a beat, just enough time for you to hear the number fully, to let it settle, to compare it against what you'd calculated. Your hand moved toward your pocket, but slowly, like you were still deciding, even though you'd already decided hours ago. The number hung in the air. You could feel other people hearing it too. The line behind you felt too close. You could hear breathing. Someone shifted their weight. A cartwheel squeaked. You didn't turn around, but you felt them there, waiting, and it made your hands move faster than you wanted them to. You fumbled with the bills. One stuck to another. You had to peel them apart. Your fingers weren't cooperating. Someone coughed. You could feel impatience radiating forward, pressing against your back. You waited for the receipt like it meant something, like it was proof, like it was documentation of a choice made correctly. The cashier held it out and you took it carefully, folded it in half without looking at it, tucked it into your pocket where it would stay for days, weeks maybe, until you finally threw it away or found it crumpled in the washing machine. Sometimes you'd smooth it out later, at home, reading each line to see where the money went. You learned this early. You counted the bills one more time before handing them over, right there, at the counter, in front of everyone. Your fingers moved through them slowly, 1, 2, 3, even though you already knew. Even though you'd known since before you got in line. But you had to be sure. You had to see them one more time before they stopped being yours. Before they became the cashier's problem, the register's responsibility. Before they transformed from your security into someone else's property. You pretended you knew the price was coming. Your face stayed neutral. You nodded slightly, like, yes, that's what I expected, even though your stomach had tightened the moment the number appeared on the screen. Even though you were doing math in your head, subtracting, checking, making sure there was enough left over for the rest of the week, you'd practice this face, this calm, this look of someone for whom numbers were just information, not verdicts. There was a pause before you handed the money over. Not long enough for anyone to notice. Just a half second where your hand stopped moving, where you held the bills in the air between you and the cashier, where they were still technically yours. Then you let go, and they were gone. And the cashier took them without ceremony, without acknowledgement of what they meant, and slipped them into the drawer where they mixed with everyone else's money and stopped being identifiable as yours. Coins felt heavier than bills. You'd pull them from your pocket, cupped in your palm, and they'd clink together as you counted them onto the counter. Quarters, dimes, nickels. The sound was loud, too loud. Everyone could hear that you were paying in change. You tried to do it quickly, tried to make it look intentional, like a choice, not a necessity. Like you were just cleaning out your pocket. Like it was convenient. The metal was cold against your skin, warming as you held it. You looked at the register instead of the cashier. At the screen. At the numbers changing. At your hands. Anywhere but their face. It wasn't personal. It was just easier. Looking at someone while money changed hands required something you didn't always have. Required a kind of confidence that assumed everything was fine, that this was normal, that you weren't calculating and recalculating and hoping. Eye contact felt like exposure. You didn't need it explained. You hoped the card would go through. You'd slide it, or insert it, or tap it, and then you'd wait. That space between action and response felt infinite. You'd stand there, hands still on the card, watching the screen, waiting for it to process, to decide, to either approve or deny you in front of everyone. The little circle would spin, or the dots would blink, and you'd hold your breath without meaning to, waiting for permission to complete this transaction. The beep meant approval. That sound, small, mechanical, final, meant yes. Meant you could breathe. Meant the transaction was complete and you could take your things and go. You learned to listen for it, to recognize its pitch, to know the difference between the beep that meant success and the beep that meant try again. That sound became tied to relief in your nervous system, a Pavlovian response you couldn't control. When the card was declined, sometimes they didn't say it out loud. The cashier would just look at the screen, then at you, and you'd already know. You'd see it in their face, in the slight hesitation, in the way they'd say, "It didn't go through," quietly, like they were trying to be kind. And you'd nod, say you'd try another card, or say, "Never mind." Or say you'd come back. Your face would stay calm, but your chest would tighten and you'd feel heat creeping up your neck. You watched the total drop after a coupon and felt something loosen in your chest. The numbers would change $47.83 to $39.83, and suddenly the math worked better. Suddenly there was more room, more buffer. You'd watch the cashier scan it, watch the screen update, and you'd feel your shoulders drop just slightly, like you'd been given something back, like you'd won a small victory against the relentless addition of costs. There was relief in having the exact amount, no change needed, no waiting for them to count coins back into your hand. You'd give them the bills, they'd give you the receipt, and that was it. Clean, simple, no remainder, no awkward moment where you both stood there while the register drawer opened and closed, no miscounting, no, "Do you have 3 cents?" No small talk about pennies. Just an even exchange, perfect and complete. You already knew what came next. Sometimes you had to choose what to put back. You'd look at the total, then at the items on the counter, then at the money in your hand. The math didn't work. Something had to go. You'd point to one, maybe the one you needed least, maybe the one that cost most, and say, "Actually, not that one." The cashier would void it. The line would wait. You'd try not to look at anyone. You'd already decided which item was most expendable before you got to the counter, had ranked them in your head just in case. You felt every dollar leave your hand, not metaphorically, actually felt it, the weight of it, the texture. The transaction wasn't abstract, it was physical. Money left your hand and became something else, something you'd carry home, something you'd use or eat or wear. But in that moment, at the counter, you felt the trade happening, felt what you were giving up to get what you needed. Each bill represented hours, effort, time you'd traded for paper that you were now trading again. You folded the receipt instead of reading it, took it from the cashier and folded it once, twice, slipped it into your wallet or your pocket without looking at the numbers. You'd look later, or you wouldn't, but not there, not at the counter, not in front of everyone. The receipt was evidence, proof of how much things cost, proof of how much you'd spent. It felt safer to ignore it until you were alone. You walked away doing the math in your head, subtracting what you'd just spent from what you'd started with, calculating what was left, thinking about what else you needed this week, whether this purchase was worth it, whether you'd made the right choice. The numbers ran on a loop as you pushed through the doors, as you walked to the car, as you loaded the bags. You'd replay the transaction, questioning every item, wondering if you could have done better. There was a difference between need and want at the counter. You learned to distinguish them in real time, to look at something in your cart and decide, right there, with people watching, whether it was necessary, whether you could justify it. Need stayed, want got, put back. The line between them was sharp, and you learned to draw it quickly. Sometimes you'd stand there holding something, feeling its weight, trying to decide which category it belonged to. This wasn't the last time. Cash felt safer than credit sometimes. You could see it, count it, know exactly how much you had and how much you were spending. Cards were abstract, numbers on a screen, but cash was real, finite. You couldn't spend what you didn't have in your hand. There was a security in that limitation. With cash, the boundary was physical. When it was gone, it was gone. With credit, the boundary was imaginary, dangerous, easy to cross without noticing. You learned to pay without looking confident. You'd hand over the money, take your things, say thank you, but your body language gave you away. Your shoulders stayed tense. Your movements were careful. You didn't linger, didn't chat, just completed the transaction and left, like if you moved fast enough, no one would notice how hard you were thinking about it. Like speed could disguise uncertainty. Sometimes you remembered your balance too late. You'd already be in line, already have items on the counter, and suddenly you'd remember, wait, what's in my account? Did that deposit clear? Did I already pay that bill? And you'd pull out your phone, trying to check quickly, trying to calculate whether you had enough, whether you should use cash instead, whether you should just leave. Your hands would shake slightly as you typed in your password. There were times you'd do the math wrong. You'd think you had enough and then the total would be higher than you expected. Tax, fees, something you'd miscounted. And you'd stand there, frozen for just a second, recalculating, trying to figure out if you could still make it work. Trying to decide if you should ask them to remove something or just hope your card wouldn't decline. That moment of miscalculation felt like failure. You learned to read the cashier's face, to know when they were judging you and when they didn't care. Most of them didn't care. They were tired. They'd seen hundreds of transactions that day. Yours wasn't special. But sometimes you'd catch something, a look, a pause, a tone, and you'd know they'd noticed. Noticed you counting, noticed you hesitating, noticed the card declining, and you'd feel seen in a way that wasn't comfortable. You always left with less than you came with. That was the whole point. But it felt specific every time. You'd walk in with money in your wallet, in your account, and walk out with things instead. The exchange was supposed to be equal, value for value, but it never quite felt that way. It felt like loss, like subtraction, like watching something drain away. You'd carry the bags to your car and feel lighter in your wallet and heavier in your hands. Sometimes you'd add things up in the aisle and still be surprised at the register. You'd count as you went $8, $15, $23, but then the total would be $31, and you'd wonder where the extra came from, what you'd missed, what you'd forgotten to count. And you'd stand there accepting the number because there was no time to recount, no time to verify, just time to pay and move forward. You developed a relationship with certain cashiers, the ones who worked your shift, who you'd see every week at the same time. They'd recognize you. Sometimes they'd say hello. Sometimes they'd comment on what you were buying, and you'd feel exposed in a new way, like they were watching your patterns, like they knew more about your life than you wanted them to. Like your purchases were telling stories you hadn't agreed to share. The counter was where everything became real. All the planning, all the calculating, all the deciding, it culminated there. In that space, in that transaction, where what you had met, what things cost, and the gap between them was either small enough to cross or it wasn't. Where you learned, over and over, in small moments that no one else was tracking, exactly what you could afford and what you couldn't, where money stopped being an idea and became a fact. You'd walk out and immediately check your receipt sometimes, right there in the parking lot, standing by your car, reading each line, making sure everything was right, making sure you weren't charged twice for something, making sure the discounts applied, making sure the math made sense, and if it didn't, you'd have to decide, was it worth going back in? Was it worth the confrontation? Or would you just absorb the loss and remember to watch more carefully next time? If you stayed this long, you know exactly how that moment feels. The weight of bills in your hand, the sound of the total being announced, the silence between deciding and paying, the relief when it's over, the anxiety before it begins. It doesn't get easier. You just get better at standing there, at making the math work, at walking away like everything's fine. Like this is just another transaction. Like you weren't holding your breath the whole time. Like the counter isn't a small stage where your worth gets tested every single time you need something. Like money is just money, not proof, not security, not the difference between having and not having. But you know better. You've always known better.